something go right over the top of us that looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast. We just had something go right over the top of us that looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast.
You actually think that physics changes as you get further away from Earth. So
that's right. I don't think they can get anyone beyond the Van Allen radiation belts.
Right. So for all you don't rule out the secret space program,
oh yeah, there may well be. Anti-gravity definitely exists. I've got Victor Schauberger's books somewhere. His work was sequestered by the Nazis right back in the 30s. I think they called it torsion physics, which leads absolutely straight into your work on the TR3B.
Now, in the final section, I discuss what the reason might be. So let's say that the hypothesis is true, that they're faking all of these missions to Mars. One would imagine it's to conceal something which perhaps is.
I think we are just going to talk for a second what Douglas was saying there. He believes that you can't get anyone beyond, or anything beyond the Van Allen radiation belt. So, I mean, I don't believe that.
No, with enough shielding, you can get anything through it.
I don't believe that all the satellites and everything are sort of fake and everything. I mean, that's one of the most troublesome things to me about the Martian rover hypothesis, is that you'd have to successfully
traverse that distance through all the
satellites. So everyone's monitoring those satellites. So those messages are coming up from the Martian surface. They're going via those satellites. Now, okay, of course, the information you're getting from the satellites is very, very minimal. And it also makes it quite confusing as to why some of the pictures are colour and some aren't. Because if they're all only going to the satellite and then getting
relayed,
what's the problem? I mean, the satellite's got quite a lot of power.
I think the problem is the actual position of Mars, dependent on the time of year and where the satellite is.
So basically, the way it works is every 26 months there's a 2-week period where the sun gets in the way. Okay. Apart from that, okay, you've got the inverse square law, but the communication broadcast by the satellites is using a dish, very much like a satellite dish. So it is a fairly focused signal. I mean, okay, it's not brilliant. It gets weaker over time, obviously, with the inverse square law. But the simple truth is that from its strongest point to its weakest point, it's not a vast amount of difference in bandwidth.
Right.
So I don't really understand why we'd ever get black and white pictures anymore. It makes no sense to me for looking at the systems.
It depends on the source, and like we saw in a previous program, this stuff is going from NASA to a private entity. Something's done to it, and then it's released to the public, if it's released at all. So that's not to say that some of the images could be years old.
That's true.
You know,
they could be letting Viking stuff out now.
Yeah. We don't know. That's the problem. There's not enough clarity, so it's anyone's guess.
But hang on a second. You see, that's the other problem, isn't it? Because the guys monitoring the satellites in NASA, verifying everything, seeing the signals come down, they don't even get to see the bloody photographs. It goes straight to someone else.
No, they have real-time imagery and telemetry. That's fine. That's one thing, but that's not the actual product of the camera. They don't have
real-time imagery. They don't get to see those photos.
No, not the photos. They have telemetry and imagery based on the system they're using.
The cameras, so they have the radar,
internal cameras and things that they're using
from the satellites.
Yeah, it's not the results of the specific photos that have been requested to be taken or whatever. That's fed through a private entity. Whatever happened to it at that point, who knows? It's tampered with or whatever, and then they release whatever they want to the public. Now, what's happened to that information or data, the imagery? Who knows? That's the problem we have.
But what would happen? I suppose nobody from NASA would ever go public saying that's not the picture we...
They wouldn't know. That's the whole thing. Compartmentalization is the key to this. If this is truly...
But there's still people at NASA who see these photographs and analyse them for a living.
Absolutely, there are. Yes, of course they are.
So are they getting them from mail-in?
No, I think they get it before that.
So there are people at NASA who see stuff that we don't see.
Absolutely.
But they just don't go public.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's see where we're going
on Mars, and I've listed what may be there. Evidence of past advanced civilizations, human or otherwise, inhabited man-made bases that have already been set up in secret spacecraft or spaceports, the fact that the planet's makeup might be significantly different to accepted scientific theory, and I think Douglas Gibson is of that mind.
The physics of Mars is probably completely different to Earth, and that's essentially what they're hiding, what they don't want us thinking about.
Right. Do you want to expand on that as to what you think it might be like on Mars?
Well, my background is, like you say, in theosophy.
Okay, let me just explain something about theosophy.
It's getting a bit woo now, isn't it?
This is just getting a little bit out there now.
Yeah, it's getting a bit woo now.
As far as I remember, theosophy kind of begins with like Madame Blavatsky and sort of like, you know, people like Mondrian, like the Dutch guy who painted all the coloured squares, and Van Doesburg and the neoplasticists and all that. They all were into theosophy. This idea that the product of everything changes depending on where you are, and that universality doesn't exist. In other words, the speed of light is not a reality of space-time. It changes all the way through. Now, of course, that's an interesting idea when you think of stuff like dark matter and dark energy, and that they've, you know, if you don't take into account dark energy and dark matter, Einstein's predictions about the galaxy, even just the Milky Way, are so far wrong that they are literally 30 times wrong. You know, 3,000%.
I could see that being the case.
So you know, obviously. Now, don't get me wrong. If you look at the way the whole thing works, there's quite a lot of decent proof for dark matter and dark energy, and so many people at so many universities do so much calculation on it. I can't believe it could be that wrong. But then, that's exactly what we would have been talking about Newton 200 years ago.
Yes.
And look what happened to him. So, I mean, the simple truth is that we could be looking at a situation where Newtonian is a great explanation for being on Earth. Einsteinium is a great explanation for being in the solar system. And as soon as you get beyond that,
it's an unknown.
It's a completely different, you know, things start to work. They're close to Einstein, but the further away you get, the more something else has a factor. Well, you know, on whatever situation it is. I mean, Douglas is talking about something that was completely theoretical. It's a philosophy. It's not a science. And you know, the idea that the whole the whole way life and everything else can exist on another planet is completely different to Earth. It's totally possible.
Yes, but it's such an unknown that it's going a bit too far
out
there.
Yeah. It's a belief.
It's belief.
It's nothing to do with research. So
yeah.
Well, I mean,
take what you hear from now on with a little bit pinch of salt from Douglas.
Please feel free to write in the comments if you have more solid evidence than this. But from where I'm sitting now, where Douglas is going is somewhere. I mean, which looking at his bookshelf, he's obviously got quite a lot of science in his head, but you know, I can't see why. You know, this to me gives credence to the fact that he already had a reason to disbelieve the Martian rovers before he began.
He's coming from a position of
prejudice.
Prejudice, yeah.
You know, so I think that's
not an objective approach.
That is a real problem for me.
Yeah,
that he doesn't believe, no matter what, he would not believe in the Martian rovers.
Well, yeah, because he you know, if he's starting from the point when the Van Allen radiation belt is the barrier that nothing can get past, anything past that is to him is science fiction.
So so whether he believes it's, so he must, so that means the whole. So what does he think the moon is? I mean, this brings the whole of his credibility into
question.
Serious question to me. Yeah. But anyway, let's see what he says.
In the theosophical worldview, rather than consciousness evolving as a kind of peripherally around matter, matter has evolved from consciousness. That sounds like I'll be accused of being unscientific, but actually you can't prove either of those sets of assumptions. It's just as valid to start from the that different standpoint.
Let me share that with you then, Douglas, because I've not delved into a great deal into this thing called consciousness on Richplanet, and scientists will agree, or some scientists will agree, that in order to observe the universe, observe everything that there is, there must be consciousness, and that consciousness must be detached in some way or different in some way from physical matter or even space. So you have to have consciousness in order to experience the world, and this consciousness element is possibly vastly underplayed or even completely ignored in modern science. But what Douglas is saying is that consciousness is probably the most important of the two.
Yeah, consciousness itself is more fundamental than matter, in my opinion. The problem kind of goes back to the split between alchemy and science about 500 years ago. So science itself kind of grew out of alchemy. Newton himself started out as an alchemist. What seems to be forgotten along the way is that science itself can still be placed back within a larger alchemical context.
Okay, so I'm gonna swallow some of my words and humble pie a bit there. Of course, Douglas is completely right. Just the other day, I saw an interview with Brian Cox, and let me tell you what he said, which I found really interesting about Brian Cox's sort of grasp of this kind of thing. He said that without life there is no meaning, right? So if Earth is the only planet to have life, which is
mathematically impossible in my book.
Exactly. And also I just don't believe that for a second. But so if we were to let Earth be destroyed through our own short-sightedness, the universe would cease to have meaning. Right, that's what he said. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. Yeah. But when you think about that statement, as soon as the universe has no meaning, it wouldn't matter because there's no one for it to matter. That whole thing collapses on itself. So what Douglas is saying is absolutely true. Without consciousness, nothing else exists.
Exactly. Yeah, and consciousness is something that goes beyond just our perception of consciousness.
So what I actually said earlier was I was falling straight into, dare I say it, sort of NASA trap. When you're thinking about all these satellites going around, all these things going, but they're only there in our perception, in our consciousness. They aren't there anywhere else.
Yeah.
There is nothing else other than our consciousness. So apologies to Douglas Gibson for what I said earlier. It was complete BS. Of course, matter has to. Matter is not maybe even just a product of consciousness. It is completely contained within consciousness.
I like you. I agree with the conscious part of it, but I'm still not going to let him off the hook for assuming that nothing can get past the Van Allen radiation belt. I'm talking about circuitry and machinery here, not just humans.
But hang on a moment. Circuitry and machinery only exist in consciousness.
All right, we're going to get down that path now. Okay.
Well, that's true, isn't it?
Yes, of course. It's relevant to that, yes.
Matter only exists in consciousness.
Yes.
That's what he's saying. Of course it does. Because if we can't perceive it, it doesn't exist.
True.
And if we can't perceive it, we can't measure it, so we can't scientifically acknowledge it. So consciousness begins everything. There's no science without consciousness.
But if you're looking at it from that perspective, does that mean the Van Allen radiation belt isn't there then.
No, but what it means is, what do you mean isn't there?
Well, if we are not conscious of it, it doesn't exist. If we're going to use consciousness,
But think about this.
What
right?
have we sent there to test?
Think about this, right? Think about this. You would only put a rocket together if you believed in the distance between here and the Van Allen radiation belt.
Yes.
Right? If you were in a state, if you were in a state of consciousness where distance was not.
But that's the whole thing about consciousness. It starts with belief, doesn't it?
No.
As well, belief is part of it. Belief is an element of it.
I think,
how do you inspire someone to do something, to design a rocket?
You're talking about further down the line. Consciousness is what a baby has as soon as it's born, as soon as it's forming. The things you're talking about are products of the left-hand side of the brain, whereas consciousness really is in the right-hand side of the brain, and the left-hand side of the brain is just what interprets it. He's talking about a universe of consciousness.
Yes, that we connect into Yes,
but we're kind of.
It's like a Wi-Fi signal that it's not. It's no use to anyone unless you have the receiver to actually transmit the data and make it into something.
Well, it's another cognitive system. In other words, it's like that Jill Balti-Taylor thing where she has the stroke and the left-hand side of her brain stops working, and she sees a world of energy. Of instantaneous kaleidoscopic energy, and she calls it La La Land, which is exactly what Carlos Castaneda and the Brazilian witch doctors and the Egyptians all said was the way life worked. And when you die, you meet the eater of the dead. We're going a bit off topic here,
just a bit,
but and you have to face up to whether you're going to be eaten and basically turn back into energy for new life, or you're going to get to keep your consciousness. I mean,
interesting.
This is fundamental to when you think about this in those terms. I mean, okay, we've gone way left field. When you think about it in those terms, that's the real problem with everyone arguing about this. Is we're arguing about something that's only within our consciousness. And we're arguing about it in a scientific way. And when you think about the concept, the conceptualization of that, it's almost like a madness. It's like, oh yeah, you've just had a new son, 8 pounds. That's the most important thing. We've already measured him. Yeah. He's an 8-pound baby. Put him in that category.
That's it. And he now exists in the perception as a baby that's 8 pounds.
8 pounds.
And that's his starting point.
These are his legs, and suddenly everything starts to be broken down.
Yeah.
It's like Terence McKenna used to say, a baby's lying in its cot and a hummingbird comes through the window and hovers above the baby, and he sees this kaleidoscopic, magical energy thing. And then the mum sort of leans over and goes, "Bird! Bird!" And she's collapsing the whole thing into this idea of one sound.
Yes.
That is everything about that experience has been not compartmentalised, but collapsed.
Summarised into...
replaced.
Yes.
Replaced. You're not examining anymore. You're taking it for granted that that's what it is. And that's exactly what science really is. It's taking everything for granted.
Yeah. Well, I think, we have got a little bit off piece there. Let's see what else he's got to say.
Context, if you like, which does indeed say that when you travel certain distances away from the Earth, all our physical constants start to change. The speed of light becomes different, which also ties in with Rupert Sheldrake's talk. Was it earlier this year?
There are other things that people have suggested whereby the non-physical element of humans, our soul, if you want to call it that, it somehow resonates with the planet itself, and that by taking your physical body away from the Earth, you're disconnecting it from some kind of field, maybe a morphic field or the akashic field, and that you would lose your marbles if you travel more than, let's say, 1 million miles from the Earth.
Well, exactly. I mean, I try to avoid sort of terms like astral and try to use modern scientific terms, which you can do instead. But just what you were talking about just then in Nexus magazine in August, they had an article about the strange experiences of the Russian cosmonauts, experience exactly the things you've just been talking about, altered states of consciousness once you travel a certain distance from the Earth. So there's a change in your consciousness and in matter itself. So when you get to the Van Allen radiation belts, the radiation you're experiencing isn't it isn't really floating around in space, which is a kind of questionable concept in itself. It's actually radiation coming from the atoms of your own body, your own spaceship. It's the beginnings of this, I suppose I'd have to call it an alchemical change in the atoms of your body, but also in your consciousness as well. It's a change in the relationship between the two. It is very, very interesting. I mean, it's just a huge... It's a whole area of science that we're being very carefully...
steered away from.
Right. Exactly, and specifically by NASA.
And if it were true, it would turn everything on its head.
Absolutely.
You're saying that the cover-up in this is something quite profound and fundamental, rather than just the fact that there might be aliens on Mars.
Exactly.
You're saying it's something fundamental about the understanding of everything that is.
Absolutely. It's about the relationship between consciousness and matter. What they used to call alchemy, but which you can look at in absolutely strictly scientific modern ways. There's nothing unscientific or irrational about thinking about consciousness itself.
Right. Okay.
And it changes everything when you do.
What came first, consciousness or matter?
Exactly.
Have we got a situation where the rovers are really on Earth, but the orbiters are really going around Mars, or are the orbiters not going around Mars either? And we're seeing some other images. That's a question I think that would need to be resolved. Or have they somehow managed to set things up such that we're going to end up arguing about the authenticity of all the images and call all the images into question? Because this is something we've seen that happen with 9/11 imagery as well, which we haven't got time to go into. But so the overall overarching thing, I think, is to cover up secret technology. So these rover programs have now become the equivalent of Apollo, in that a lot of good minds, with highly skilled technical abilities, detailed technical knowledge, they're now soaked up into those sorts of programs, and they're not going to be sort of entertaining the idea of black programs, secret technologies, and this sort of thing. They're all helping unwittingly to keep all of that covered up. That it may just be that the rover program is all part of that perception management operation. That's quite possible.
It may well be that they put the rover on a rocket and then just crash it into the back of the moon, or into the ocean, and then they're all being duped by images that are being sent back by some other covert team.
Right.
That's once again, that's not really possible, because there's too many people monitoring all the satellite. You'd have to fake the whole thing. So everyone in Spain, everyone in Hawaii, everyone in Western Australia, everyone in the ESA, you could have a small band of people who were in on it for sure.
Yeah.
And okay, it's all compartmental, but I don't think someone like NASA is particularly. If you look at the structure of what they do when they're all in the room together doing the drop tests, I don't think that is a particularly compartmentalised situation.
I don't think, no. I think once you're set up in your team, it's a little family and everyone just hunkers around together and problem solves, And
I think it's also a place that is, if I can, something that can happen if you watch like people like show business people, or quite often scientific people too, they're almost blinded by positivity.
Yeah.
There's so much.
It's tunnel vision on the subject at hand.
It's kind of, it's kind of almost as if I don't know how to describe it. It's literally anybody that's not contributing towards it's just a real enemy.
Yeah, well, they don't even exist.
Exactly, and they're going to be out real quick.
Mm.
And those kind of organisations,
they're sniffed out pretty quickly, aren't they?
Ultimately that could be a part of it. But I mean, from sitting here right now, it just seems so hard to believe that. I think that Douglas. Let's just take for example Douglas' point about consciousness. I think that the Martian situation is within Einsteinian space-time rules. Otherwise, they couldn't. I don't believe you could fake all the satellites and everything else. They've got to have. No. They've got to have. Because what about the Cydonia thing? How does Douglas explain that?
Yeah,
Douglas never gets. He never puts that to Douglas.
No.
Why would they do the face? Because that kind of makes Douglas's argument a bit kind of.
It dilutes it a little bit more. I think, I think you mentioned it earlier, but I think ultimately the deception is to keep the status quo and not disrupt the apple cart. If people were to know that there were other civilizations on Mars, that we've already got space travel down to a T, it's like Star Trek, if these things are true, like they're suggesting here, the woo stuff, the world would change, and it would change. The consciousness of the world would change, and people's priorities would change. Yes, you still have to do your washing in the morning, but what are you working for? What are you working towards in your life? What matters to you? What really matters to society, to mankind as a whole? I think these things are put at risk when these lies are brought to the light. If they're lies.
I'm not so sure about that. I mean, if you think about how mad a washing machine is, right? Just imagine if we all lived 10 billion of us in medieval conditions and everyone was going down to the local river with a box of Daz and just pouring it in, like 600,000 people pouring Daz into the river. I mean, people would start going, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. The washing machine takes that idea and covers it up. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
It stops you realising that you're pouring 3 litres of Daz into your local
water system
every month, or whatever it is. And all the conditioner and all the fairy liquid and all the dishwasher tablets. It stops you realising that stuff.
It changes your perception of what you're doing.
Of the damage you're doing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the damage you're doing.
Because you're actually, you're using energy as well. That's another factor, Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, to me, we live in a world that is... I don't think... If it turned out that there was another society on Mars, I think you could make people forget about it in a week.
Probably, but I don't think they'll get over the fact that they were lied to for so long.
I don't think most people would even... they'd find a way to weasel out of it. In
today's world?
Yeah, they would. I mean, if you think about something like... Well, they wouldn't even have to. They'd just come out with a story about frickin' Emma Stone's dress falling off. That would be enough to get everyone away from it. Because you've only got to deal with the Western world. It doesn't matter what the Africans think in this world.
It's a shame, but it's...
Well, in this world, because this world isn't the Africans' world. The Africans live in a different world to us, culturally. They don't see the same news as us. Just like the people in the Middle East don't see the same news as us. Whereas the people in France, the people in Spain and Italy and Germany and America and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, they all see the same news as us. They live in the same world as us.
Yeah.
In the sort of Rothschild world.
Yeah.
The people in the Middle East don't live in that world.
They live in the more pure and...
Well, perhaps
more pure
from
and...
Saudi. Probably Saudis see the same news as us.
Yeah.
But, people in Syria see the other side of the coin. If they even get any news left at all. They've been completely bombed to bits by now. What happens in Russia, I'm pretty sure Russia see pretty much the same news as us now. Except for the only difference being with the news about them.
Yeah.
But if you look at a lot of Russians, kind of disown their own country, and I think that's really what is telling about what they're trying to do to Putin. In some ways, I wonder if Putin is not the only honest politician around. Because what I can't understand is if you look at something like, think about that channel, it used to be called Yeah Russia with Natasha, whatever her name is. She changed it to Natasha's Adventures when they invaded Ukraine because she was disgraced by her own people. Can you imagine the Americans doing that when they invade Iraq? Oh, I've changed. It's no longer called the good old US of A. I've changed it to Boris's Adventures because I don't want anything to do with America. It's just not. It's not the same.
Yeah, you're talking about perception and the people that actually,
So whoever
are exposed to it.
Whoever's controlling the news are not protecting Putin the way they protect someone like Bush, or Trump, or whoever. So there's something about our current situation where Putin is being driven out.
Yeah, but this is a little bit off topic here, so let's get back on topic.
But you know what I'm saying?
I know where you're going with it.
All of this is about how you think about stuff, right?
Yeah.
The whole Martian idea, at the end of the day, NASA is another washing machine. It's in the way of space.
Yes.
You don't have to think about space because NASA's there.
Yes.
You open your NASA book and there's your space.
Yeah.
You close it and that's the end of space. Just like screwing the river is your washing machine.
Yeah.
Whatever they're doing to the space, they're doing on the other side of NASA.
Don't you worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Here's your washing machine, mate.
Here's a picture of a rocket taking off.
Exactly.
Go to bed.
Go back to bed.
Yeah.
That, to me, is what NASA is.
Yes, I agree with you.
It is a washing machine.
Yeah. It is.
And what the hell it's really all about, maybe space doesn't even exist. Who even knows? But the end of the day, if you work there, I don't know what it's like to work there, but having seen what some of the simple truth is, you should be able to prove you landed on the moon without a lot of problems. That should be a fairly easy thing to do. It's only 370,000 kilometres away, 380,000 kilometres away. You should be able to send a vehicle that can do a flyover of the one
low
of the
level
zones.
flyover. Yeah.
There's no atmosphere. You can fly past it at 1 kilometre, even closer, with a really amazing camera, and just go bang. There you go, and that should be an absolute piece of cake
For someone like NASA, yeah.
55 years later, that should be nothing, and yet no one's doing it. Now, are they doing that because they just want to keep churning the confusion wheel, or are they doing that because
they have to?
There's nothing there. I mean, we just don't know, do we?
No, we don't. It's scary to think about, actually. We can only perceive what we're fed because that's all we have.
The washing machine.
The washing machine. The washing machine is what.
If they took the washing machine away, what would happen to us?
I don't know.
We can't survive without the washing machine. We'd be surrounded by dirty clothes.
Yeah, exactly. Reality.
We have been turned into people dependent on whatever this is.
Yes.
Whatever this is, we can't live without it anymore. So the simple truth is, even questioning it is a difficult problem.
Yeah, because to be exposed to the reality is quite daunting.
If we had to solve, if there was a nuclear holocaust tomorrow, if Mr. Rothschild pressed his get rid of the Goyim button, what would we do?
The washing machine would stop, and reality would seep in.
Well, you'd have to go down to the river, and it would be full of dead people, and you'd be like, "Oh, this isn't going to get my clothes any cleaner." But you'd have to get fairly used to wandering around in the same set of clothes for a few years, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Anyway, let's get back on topic now.
Okay, that's right.
I think unless we have a completely independent citizen-based space program where Tom, Dick and Harry can build their own craft and get it to Mars and then go and film their technology on Mars, I'm not going to believe it. Do you see what I mean? Independent verification.
Yeah. And I mean, if we look at how difficult that is, I mean, if we take we talked a little bit about this, of the recent crash of the Virgin spaceship 2 that broke up just after it was released from the plane. I mean, that's a kind of a civilian space program.
It's. I don't buy what happened there. It's to me, they're trying to put into the public's mind that anything above the Earth's atmosphere is really difficult, folks. There's no way civilians can manage it.
Right.
Whether Branson's in on that or not, I don't know. I've stuck my neck out and...
We've just got to say one thing about that. I would personally say that without having to worry about all of the difficulties of the atmosphere, it gets much easier.
Well, if it's a vacuum, you haven't got a lot to worry about.
It's
just gravity is your problem.
Pressurization and gravity.
Yes.
Those are your two main problems. And pressurization, obviously, they deal with all the time. I mean, that's not a big deal. They deal with it in the ocean, they deal with it in the U2, they deal with it in... Concorde, for God's sake, was pressurized at 60,000 feet.
Yes.
You know, if you can pressurize at 60,000 feet, you can pressurize 120,000, etc., etc. As soon as you don't have to worry about noise, all the problems... I mean, I remember when we were there with Thrust SSC, and the problems with noise build-up on transonic sections of the wings, all these problems were phenomenally complicated. Like the mathematics these guys went through. As soon as you're in a vacuum, you can go accelerate. You don't even have to worry about anything.
No.
There's nothing going to collapse or break or snap.
No.
Because there's nothing to stop you.
No.
All you've got to do is work out how long to fire the rocket for, so you don't wind up not being able to come back again. And you've got to be ready for re-entry, of course, which is important because.
Yeah, so heat, gravity, and pressurization.
So you've got to be ready for
radiation, microasteroids.
Well, I mean, you say that, but if there's any truth to ISS at all,
yeah,
and there certainly seems to be, because you can watch it go past. Yeah. Micrometeorites can't be that big a problem.
Yeah, but you know, when you're out, if you're talking about a journey to Mars, you're facing many different challenges.
But what I'm saying is, in low Earth orbit, I don't think meteorites are that much of a problem. I think that they burn up.
Yeah, that's one issue. I mean, temperature's another. You know, it's a very low temperature once you're out there. It's a very high temperature once you want to get back in. The variance between those two is something that your technology has to be able to handle, and also the period of time you're out there. So there are challenges, yes, but it's not impossible. So,
but what I'm saying is that in terms of, if you want to do Mach 10 in the atmosphere, that's a real problem. If you want to do Mach 10 in low Earth orbit,
that's fine.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
All you got to do is fire the rocket. There's no
resistance,
structural problems.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's go a little further.
Said I'm 75% sure. I think Andrew's right on the fence, but you're convinced.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I like I say, I only intend to spend an hour kind of dismissing the idea, and the whole subject. Every time I've looked, it's exactly the same as Apollo. Like I say, you take any aspect and try and get to the bottom of the science behind it, and pretty soon everything's falling apart in your hands.
And once you become convinced, do you feel annoyed about it?
I did initially, yeah. I mean, you do. The same as with Apollo. This is one of the biggest problems. What's that famous saying? It's difficult to deceive people, but it's even harder to convince them that they have been deceived.
Yeah.
Because then, of course, their pride's involved.
Yeah.
So yes, when you try and broach a subject like this, people start getting angry.
Yeah. All right, but you've got over that.
Yeah. I've got over it.
You start. It comes to the point where you actually start to laugh at it. I did manage to get a photograph of the operators taken from behind their shoulders, and we'll just have a look at what they're looking at on the screen. Remember, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.